Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Pokemon Adventures Podcast, a podcast short from the Every Pokemon Episode Ever podcast brand. And today we are going over Chapter 5. This is the 5th episode on this long journey that we're going down. And today's episode is titled Onix Is On. So I guess I can start this week's podcast with a breakdown as to what happened on last week's episode if you have not heard it. If you have not, shame on you. Go back and listen. It's a good episode. But Red made his way over to Pewter City, where a wild Pikachu was causing a lot of ruckus within the town. So Ash's thought was, I'm going to battle this Pikachu and I'm going to catch it. So it's at this point that he sends his Bulbasaur out to battle Pikachu. He ends up capturing Pikachu, but him and Pikachu are not on the same footing, as Pikachu does not want to be caught. It does not want to be with Red. It doesn't anything. And this is where Blue comes into the picture, introduces, not introduces, but tells Red about the Brock and the Boulder Badge. And they make a bet as to who can get the Boulder Badge first. And as Red is going over to the Pokemon Center, he cannot heal his Pokemon because someone has vandalized the Pokemon Center and it's completely shut down. But he starts hearing a lot of ruckus coming from the gym, and he runs in and he sees a Charmeleon inside of what looks like a boxing ring. And that is where we start this week's episode. So this week's episode again is Chapter 5. We are on page 62. If you are following us in the manga or while reading the manga on your digital or hard copy. And from here, right before we started, we heard everyone in the audience going, kill, yeah. And from here, we look into the ring, and Red immediately notices that Blue is in the ring, standing next to Charmeleon. So his Charmander has evolved, everybody. And Red is like, Blue? And then we hear the announcer go, Brock's preliminary round is about to start. And Red's like, oops. And he's like just pushing through the crowd. And then he runs to the back and he tells the receptionist at the desk and is like, my name's Red. I'm number 18. And then we go straight to the ring again. And we don't know what happened with Blue, but we hear the announcer going, I've seen my share of fights here, but I've hardly ever seen anybody blow through the preliminaries to get to Brock. Figures with the Pewter City Gym's finest standing in the way. And then we have one of the Pokemon trainers right before Red is getting up to Brock, and he has his Graveler standing right behind him, and he's like, come on, punk, let's get this thing going. And then he looks down and he's like, okay, you're on. And he looks down and he's like, man, I have not had a chance to heal any of my Pokemon. He's like, oh, great. This is going to be hopeless. He sees that Pikachu is the only Pokemon that he has in his arsenal that can battle at full strength. And he even goes, he's the only one at full health, but I couldn't train him. And he's talking about how he's daydreaming back to when him and Pikachu were at odds. And then he looks down at Bulbasaur and Poliwhirl. He's like, well, I don't have a choice. They're low on health, but I've got to fight with these two. And then he sends out his Poliwhirl, who is half asleep because his Poliwhirl is so weak right now. And the Pokemon trainer in the ring is like, that one don't look like much to me. Does it even got any health left, punk? And then they ring the bell for the match. Ding, ding, ding. And Red's like, let's win this with the first attack, Poliwhirl. And you see Poliwhirl use its water gun attack. And then you hear plop, plop, plop. And then it completely wets Graveler. And then Red tells Poliwhirl to use Ice Beam now. And completely encases Graveler in the ice. And then out of nowhere, the ice breaks, and you wouldn't believe it in a Pokemon comic, but Graveler breaks into a million pieces, knocking him out right away. And the trainer's like, ah! And Red's like, we can't afford to take even one hit or we're finished. And you see Poliwhirl going, ah, ah, ah. And then we hear the announcer go, that kid showed me something. He's finishing every fight with his first attack. He's only got two of the things, but with the swift water Pokemon and the power of fighting grass Pokemon, he's got great balance. And we're looking at a couple different screen caps of Poliwhirl shooting off water gun. We have a scene where Bulbasaur is using its Vine Whip on a Sandshrew. And then we go to the next panel, and there's Poliwhirl, and the announcer's like, he doesn't waste his attacks either. The punk's got strategy. And we go to the next panel, and it's Red and Bulbasaur versus a Cubone. And then we hear the announcer go, he did it again! And then everyone's cheering for Red in the next panel as he's standing next to Bulbasaur. Now he finally gets to face gym leader Brock. And then we see Brock standing up in the window in the highest point of the gym, looking down with his Pokemon. And his Pokemon in the panel are Geodude, Graveler, and Onix. And then we get a close-up of Brock. And he's like, at last, an opponent worthy of me. In the next panel, we go straight to what looks like an intermission, and we are at the back of the gym entrance. And Red is looking over at his Pikachu. He's like, oh, come on, Pikachu. Poliwhirl and Bulbasaur are pooped. Just this one time, please? Okay? And Pikachu's like, fuh, I'm not listening to you. And then we go straight back inside of the gym, and he's like, well, we're up. And he's pushing Pikachu, and Pikachu is like resisting to walk into the ring. He's literally scooting him in, and Brock is studying with his Onix standing right there. And then we hear bing, bing, bing. And the match is on. And Brock is just standing there. Pikachu doesn't want to listen. And Brock is like, where's your famous first attack, boy? And Brock's looking at him. He's like, guess I better go first then. Onix, rock throw. And then the next panel literally shows Rocks in the ring. And Pikachu is just dodging it all free-mindedly, just going gong, 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 just bouncing off all of the rocks. But one rock lands a lucky shot right at Pikachu's head. Boom! And then the whole crowd's like, oh no! The Pokemon took the full blunt of the attack. Looks like this one is the end! Little do they know, Pikachu turns its head. It's like, churr. Pika! And Red's like, oh my god, what are you doing, Pikachu? And Pikachu turns around and just thunder shocks Red. And Red's like, ah! Brock is in shock. He's like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? And he's like, what a joke. Because in the next panel, Pikachu is chasing Red literally around the ring because it got hit in the face by a rock. And it's just thunder shocking the mess out of Red. And Brock is now getting so upset. He's like, so you were just winning with dumb luck before? He's like, my Onix's ultimate attack is to use its own body as a tornado. And then he goes, and then the announcer's like, the speed of its revolutions set off unstoppable shock waves. And Onix starts going in, and Red's like, ah! And then we hear, it's a big one! Watch out, Pikachu! And Red is looking on, and Brock is like, the final strike! Skull Bash, Onix! And then we get the next few frames, and Onix is going right in at Pikachu. And Ash is like, oh no, no! And he grabs Pikachu and jumps out of the way of Onix and saves Pikachu from getting hit. And the whole audience is like, shh. And Red's like, you okay? And Pikachu's like, P? And Pikachu looks up at him. And it's like, man, you saved me. Red's like, whoa, I'm glad. Look, you don't have to fight for me if you don't want to. I'm sorry I forced you into this. And then Pikachu, we get a close-up of Pikachu and it thinking back to Red from a previous scene where Red was like, how about we just try to be friends, Pikachu? And then from here, we go to the next panel and Brock is standing right there with its Onix. Ha! We won't miss this time. Onix, attack! And it's at this point, Pikachu's like, I'm not about to get hit again. And it starts charging up its cheeks. And it's charging. And it's charging. And Onix is coming down for a final blow. And it's at this point, just like in the Pokemon series with Ash, Pikachu lets off a big old thunder shock. And the thunder shock strikes Onix. And Onix is hurt. And Brock is like, what? And man, this manga does get a little graphic because that thunder shock literally broke Onix into a million pieces. Like its whole body just falls apart and Brock's like, no! And the whole audience is like, what's happening? And Brock is like, it can't be. And Pikachu does a little curtsy and is like, ta-da! And Ash is like, not Ash, Red is like, whoa. And the whole audience starts cheering. They're like, yay! And the referee walks over to Red and holds its arm up. And Pikachu is like, P? And the referee names Ash the winner. And then from there, it is now midday, and Red is on the outside staring at his Boulder Badge. And he goes, so Blue and I ended up being the only ones to win the Boulder Badge. He's like, thanks, Pikachu. I couldn't have done it without you. And Pikachu is just sitting there and just not answering. She's like, huh. And he goes, Pikachu, meet Poliwhirl and Bulbasaur. They're good friends of mine. We'd love to have you join us if you want to. And then Red puts his hand out. He's like, shake on it? And Pikachu's like, Pikachu. And Pikachu puts its hand out. And then they shake. And then Red's like, so we're good? And then Pikachu lets out a thunder shock. And Red's like, ah! He's like, what was that for? And Pikachu starts chasing him around the wooded area that they're resting at. He's like, and just when I thought I was finally getting somewhere, ah! And then we jump over to the next panel. And right here, we hear, roar! So we are no longer with Red. And then we go down and we see Misty. And Misty seems like she is just hurt. And we got a close-up of her face and her arms and her foot. She's just dirty. She looks hurt. And then we go to the next panel and we see a Gyarados. And this Gyarados looks angry and it's like, roar! And then we have Misty and her Staryu standing right there. And Misty's like, oh my God, it's the Hydro Pump, Staryu. Get away! And Gyarados lets out a nice Hydro Pump. And it's at this point that we are going to hit the to be continued button on this episode because we are going right into chapter 6, which is titled Gyarados Splashes In. So that was it. That was a really, really good episode. So Ash, I really have to stop saying Ash, but Red finally got his Boulder Badge. And he did acknowledge that Blue got his Boulder Badge as well. But I guess Blue ended up winning that bet because Blue got the Boulder Badge before Red did. But we never did see Blue watching this fight. It seems like Pikachu is starting to warm up towards Red just a little bit, but it's still having its little fun. I can't wait to really see what this relationship is going to be like between Red and Pikachu. And I'm sure it's going to be one heck of a run when it comes to these two. And but what is really going to happen? They really foreshadowed into next week's episode. So we see Gyarados and we see Misty at the end of this. And she looks like she's either battling or just being attacked by this Gyarados. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see where they end up going with this. And it's a nice introduction to seeing Misty in the manga series. And I'm not going to lie, Misty looks a little older in this manga series. I'm not sure if we're going to find out her age or not, or find out what's really going on here. But Misty looks like she is in a lot of trouble. But other than that, I guess we'll have to wait until next week to find out what happens. Or it's plug-in time, everybody. Or you can go over to patreon.com/everypokemon and you can listen to the next 3 chapters after this, because chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8 are in one file right now on Patreon, and you can go ahead and find out right this second what is going on with Gyarados and Misty, because I combined all of those chapters into one for your convenience. So we'll be going one chapter at a time on Patreon. And that's about it. So thank you for tuning in this week for this short podcast episode. I hope you're enjoying these Pokemon manga podcasts as much as I'm enjoying them. Also, I have started doing the Pokemon specials, is what they're called, the Japanese versions of this manga on our Patreon. Go on there. Those are Patreon exclusive. They're a little bit, just a little bit more raunchier than the American version. So you can go on there if that is what interests you. Don't forget to listen to our regular podcast with me and my co-host, Dougie Fresh, this upcoming Friday for a brand new episode of the Every Pokemon Episode Ever podcast. But other than that, I don't have anything else to say, so I'm going to get ready to sign out, and we will see you next week, everybody, for Chapter 6 of the Pokemon Adventures podcast, a sub-podcast, short podcast for the Every Pokemon Episode Ever podcast brand. And next week's episode is Gyarados Splashes In. Have a good night, everybody, and I will see you next week.